You may know that certain hormones and enzymes inside of the human body are proteins, but what actually is a protein? What defines what the structure of a protein actually consists of? Now, a protein is a long polymer. You would have probably heard of the word polymer before, used in industrialization for things like plastics, stuff like polythene, polyethylene, polystyrene, that's another polymer. All of that stuff is polymers, but proteins and polypeptides specifically, they are also polymers, and these polymers, the specific monomers inside of the polypeptide, are known as amino acids. And these amino acids can join together, and our bodies can use this function of the way that amino acids can join together to form long chains of amino acids inside of our body that can be used for various functions. The majority, I'm pretty sure most enzymes are made out of long chains of amino acids. A lot of hormones, barring steroid hormones, are made out of proteins, long chains of amino acids. But how on earth are these long chains of amino acids actually formed? Now, if you look at the sort of the baseline level, the way that amino acids are actually able to join together, if you look at the generic structure of an amino acid, you've got the amino group and you've got the carboxyl group. When you have two of these, when you have two separate amino acids, the carboxyl group of one will be able to react with the amine group of the other one. And if you look at the OH group on the carboxyl group, and you look at one of the hydrogen molecules on the nitrogen that's like going off the nitrogen, that's sort of the sum of the OH and the H equals H2O. So when these two molecules react, it will, the two amino acids will combine together. The N will end up joining to the carbon molecule that is on the end of the generic amino acid, on the end of the 2 carbon unit chain, and then that releases water. This is known as condensation polymerization, where water is released, or any sort of small molecule is released during the polymerization process of any kind of polymer thing to begin with. And this condensation polymerization process can also work in the reverse with something known as hydrolyzation. Enzymes which are made up of proteins will break down proteins that have been made by other organisms and that you have eaten and that you're currently digesting. Enzymes such as pepsin and trypsin will break down the long chains of amino acids into the individual amino acids. But the way that these enzymes break that specific protein down is by adding water to that long chain, and that will mean that it can end up becoming its individual amino acids again. Proteins are such a necessary and useful thing for the body to produce, but how on earth does it produce it? Proteins are far too big to be, when it goes into the digestive system, when it gets into the gut, you can't absorb a whole protein through the gut lining. It has to be broken down into the amino acids, as we've discussed. Then it will be absorbed into the bloodstream, and then your body has to build up the proteins again from there. It's like almost like a security system in a way, to make sure that no dangerous protein, I suppose, gets past your digestive system and into your bloodstream, which probably wouldn't be good news in the end. But proteins are made in pretty much every single cell of your body, bar maybe things like red blood cells, which don't have a nucleus to begin with. And proteins are coded and made using your genes. Your genetics defines what proteins are made inside of your body. For instance, the way that your skin is structured. Skin contains a very long polypeptide known as collagen. Collagen is mostly made up of the amino acid glycine, things like proline as well. And your genes will code for your body to be able to make that specific amount of collagen that is in your body at any specific time. You've got other long chain proteins such as keratin, the things inside of your nails, your hair, that is all proteins. A lot of stuff, probably more than what you think, is made up, at least on a baseline level, of proteins. And how different and unique your genes are from one person to the other essentially defines how different you look because of the different genes your body contains, and that will mean that your body will code for different varieties of proteins, which means that you will look entirely different to what someone else would. But to understand how proteins can be coded from DNA, you have to understand what DNA is actually structured like. Now, DNA monomers, nucleotide monomers, have a nitrogenous base, either adenosine, thymine, cytosine, or guanine. They will have a deoxyribose sugar and a phosphate group. Now, the bases are the important part here in the synthesis of proteins. Bases come in pairings. A and T, adenosine and thymine, go together, and then you've got C and G, cytosine and guanine. Those two bases go together, and when you have the double helix sort of DNA structure, the little things inside of the middle, that is the bases hydrogen bonding to each other, and only adenosine and thymine can bond to each other in that way, and only guanine and cytosine can bond to each other in that specific way. But what happens for protein synthesis is that the double helix will unravel, and you will have one half of this DNA strand, and it will then be coded into mRNA, which is a separate sort of thing to what normal DNA is like. The difference between mRNA and just another half of DNA is that mRNA uses another nitrogenous base known as uracil, which replaces the nitrogenous base that forms inside of DNA, thymine. So uracil ends up replacing thymine when you end up coding for mRNA. So any of the sort of A's that exist on that specific branch of DNA that the mRNA codes for, when mRNA is being coded, any A's, the mRNA will end up utilizing uracil as a nitrogenous base rather than thymine. And mRNA will also utilize straight up ribose sugar rather than deoxyribose sugar. Not entirely sure why it has to be so different, but your body just, I guess, must have to use it in that certain way. Now, the mRNA will probably be carried by a specific enzyme into the cytosol of the cell and then into the ribosome, and the ribosome is where the protein synthesis will then take place. Methionine is the one amino acid that will always start protein synthesis. You've got your A, your U, your G, and your C bases along this mRNA strand, and this will go into the ribosome. The ribosome will search for the starting codon. Now, a codon is a specific group of 3 nitrogenous bases in a specific order. Now, methionine, the amino acid that has to start the process of protein synthesis, is coded for by the codon AUG. So the ribosome will go along this mRNA strand, it will find AUG, and when it gets to AUG, when it sort of senses that AUG has been picked up on this mRNA strand, it will send signals to the rest of the cell that will bring methionine over from another carrier molecule, and then that can start protein synthesis. After AUG, the next sort of 3 nitrogenous bases, in whatever order it could be AGG, it could be GAU, or something like that, and then it will just continue and continue and continue for probably a while. All of these different amino acids will be coded for, and carrier molecules will bring these amino acids from the cytosol of the cell to this specific ribosome where protein is being synthesized, and then it will just go on and on and on and on. I'm not exactly sure of specific iterations and specific amino acids, but leucine, I think, can be coded by 4 different sort of iterations of nitrogenous bases. And the way that your body will sort of do this, it will make the protein, and then when your genetics want to stop that protein being made anymore, your mRNA would have already sort of thought about this. Your DNA would have already sort of thought about this before you would have even been conceived, and your mRNA would have a stop codon sort of set out way down the line of the mRNA, and then that will mean that the protein will end up being released from the ribosome and set out to do its specific function. Now, the specific codons that indicate that the protein synthesis has to stop are UAA, UAG, and UGA. That means that protein synthesis will stop, the mRNA will detach from the ribosome, your amino acids that have gone through condensation polymerization, where the sort of H of the nitrogen and the OH of the carboxylic acid group have gone on to form water so that the 2 amino acids can be bonded together. Now, what's interesting is this is why amino acids and proteins in general are such a crucial part of the diet. Of course, you probably would have heard of proteins and macronutrients and all that sort of stuff, but while all this stuff can contribute to muscle and can contribute calorifically, it's protein synthesis that is the most important reason why proteins exist, because without protein synthesis, it is very likely that muscle wouldn't be built at all. And so you need an adequate intake of protein, because protein deficiency is surprisingly common among the modern world, especially because people don't realize that they need to get a wide variety of amino acids to be able to actually get all of the amino acids that are involved in protein synthesis, there are around 20 protoneogenic amino acids, meaning that they form proteins. There are many amino acids, around 504 in nature, but only 20 of these which have the amino acid structure are actually able to form proteins inside of the human body specifically. Not sure if it's different for other plants, etc., but I know that in humans it's around, I think it's 20 or 21 that can be used inside of this process. It's the reason that amino acids are so vital, and while your body can produce on its own accord from other macronutrients such as glucose and fat, etc., while your body can produce 11 amino acids which are defined as non-essential from other macronutrients, there are still 9 other amino acids which are essential, which must be consumed through the diet. And the chances are, if you are an active person, you're going to need those other macronutrients, the fats, the glucose, to actually contribute to things like the Krebs cycle, rather than being formed into proteins, which are used to make the enzymes, which are involved in all of these different cycles. So having a protein deficiency can be a very worrying thing for you and for your health. And while it may not be common among my viewers who are watching this video, I know there are definitely people out there who do have protein deficiencies, and it should be something that's worth talking about, which is why education about science is such an important thing. And I highly recommend anyone that watches these videos, anyone that doesn't, even though they probably won't be watching this right now, to definitely educate themselves on a basic understanding of the scientific level of health and anatomy of the human body and how it works, because it will benefit you in just your knowledge and your understanding of how you can improve yourself in all the variety of different ways that there are to do so. But with that, that's about all. That is the process of protein synthesis, how you can literally take your DNA that codes for how blue your eyes are, how big your ears are, what kind of jawline shape you have, what sort of skull shape you have. All of that stuff is coded by your DNA, and that codes for proteins, which makes up a lot of your body composition. But with that, I highly recommend subscribing, because I produce a lot of content like this, and I also recommend subscribing because I like this community of young tribal people who are willing to improve themselves so much more than they already have, and good luck.